Okay, so next step, I'm going to show you how to eliminate all the redundant access links and set up the whole thing with trunk ports. Um, it's going to take a little bit more planning on any switch that has more than one trunk port coming out. So when you're planning this, because again, I'm going to do this over here in Notepad++, uh, I'm going to go from the first part of this, setting the whole thing up with just access links, into trunk. I'm going to start with the access ports. So again, I have this saved as a project, VLAN, no trunk. And then I'm going to save it again, save project as VLAN, and I'll call it router on stick, and give that a save. Oh, running topology could not be exported. Okay, so I'll shut the whole thing down, hopefully. And we'll wait a second here, probably for the best. And again, save project as VLAN router on stick. And this time, hopefully, it resaves it and reopens it. So that should be, that's a lot of work for the VM to do. That's what it's doing now, is rebuilding all this with a new name. So I'll zoom out of here just a touch. I'm going to restart the whole thing. Hopefully everything starts up. I actually haven't done this part before. I've never resaved the project. I always start them over. So that works. Great. And going through here, the first thing I'm going to do is kind of select these links. I'm just going to get rid of them. I don't have to worry about. Now, is my existing configuration of the switches any good? Sure. I have half the port set up for access to VLAN 1. I have half the port set up for access to VLAN 2. And I can set this thing up. And for the basis of this, I'm just going to, I'm on my outside two routers here, or switches, excuse me, I'm going to set up Ethernet 00 as my trunk. Seems pretty basic. Here, I already have them disconnected, so I'll set up the middle two as my trunking ports here. And that will relieve the need to, in fact, I'll use one port out of, in my center one here, I'll use one port out of VLAN 1, Ethernet 00 as one trunk port, and another trunk port out of VLAN 200, which would be Ethernet 20. So I'll take one out of each just to kind of lighten the load. Okay, but since this is what we already have, I'll just write it in after this. So the router config's in there, and we'll have to play around with that here in a little bit too. So now, I'll configure the outside two routers first. I'm assuming, and we'll pull up this router just to make sure, and when I say show VLAN brief, yes, it's set up the way that I left it. So that's a good start. So what's really the next step? I'm going to start it here. I'm going to put a little comment in and say trunk configuration terminal. I'm going to go to interface E00. And again, I'm not going to I'm just going to this one interface in this case. I'm not configuring an interface range in any way. Then I will need to set up that one port to act as a trunk. Now to do that, realistically, the first thing it's going to kick out errors unless I tell it the type of encapsulation to use. So it's going to be switch port trunk mode .1Q. .1Q. And then I should say switch port mode trunk. Now, we've had some questions in class about security and using VLANs, and one of the things you can do is we can say a couple things that we could do. By default, the trunk is going to be on the native VLAN, which is VLAN 1. So in this case, we could leave it to that, or we could move it. I'm going to leave it. The other thing we can do, and the native VLAN is always sending data untagged. So if you have some legacy devices that are that won't support VLANing, you should put them in whatever you're considering the native VLAN. The other thing that we can do is say switch port trunk allowed VLAN 100 200. So that should give me some basic config, especially for the outside 2 routers. So let's do that. Let's grab this, copy it, come back in here, or excuse me, the outside 2 switches. We'll bring this guy up, and I should be able to just right click in here and it all goes in. This is a common situation here. I kicked out an error on the line that says switch port mode trunk. Oh, that is not correct. So let's go back. I'll leave this in here. I think it's a good learning tool. We're going to say switch port trunk encapsulation .1Q. Okay. So, going back here, if this happens when you're in production, right? I'm just going to re-grab where I got, so I'm in my looking here, I'm in my adapter, I haven't changed that. So I know that these first 2 lines got executed, and then that one's the one that messed things up. What do we do here? Invalid range. Yeah, no space. So, again, we'll go back and fix this up. We'll save it. Save it somewhere where you know where it's at. CIT 372 lab 1. Right? So I have a record of this. So I got it fixed now. Copy that. And we'll come over to this guy. And we're going to paste that in. And get that. So it brought down the interface, brought it back up. Should be all configured. If you want to make sure, you can exit, show, run, and look down through the running config and find Ethernet 0. It's accessing VLAN 100, which probably won't do anything. Its encapsulation is .1Q. There's another option for encapsulation for adding the VLAN tag. It's very rarely used. It's I even forget what it is. I believe it's like ISL, but honestly, I've never used it. .1Q is always encapsulation. Then you can set the VLANs allowed and switch port mode trunk. Now, that's a good start. So let's go back over here, and we can actually take this command and copy it, this configuration, and I'm going to put a little exclamation point here and say middle switch only, right? And again, that won't get and then I'll take this configuration here, copy it, paste it in, and change my interface to interface 2.0, change the encapsulation, change it to a trunk port, allow the VLANs. So the native VLAN for these will still be VLAN 1. So I'm going to grab all this, copy it, go to VLAN 2 here, paste it. I'm cooking. So I have 0, in this one I have 0, 0 and 2, 0. Okay, so let's do some wiring. 0, 0, 2, 0, 0. We'll do that. Here it's 0, 0. That's what I've set up. And here I have to send it over to 2, 0. Now, at this point, everything should be cooking. I would like to see the green lights. So, as I look at Ubuntu 1, it still has the same IP addressing 192.168.1.10, and we should be able to ping 192.168.1.11, and hopefully, wow. I wonder what happened here. Let's make sure that it copied the configuration. Did it copy the configuration? Yes. Okay. And this guy here is going to if config. I had to reload these and I never went back through. So this is 11. That should be, save that, hit OK. Power off. Power on. This guy here is going to be configure, edit. I had a little snafu in between my videos when I was testing a couple things to get ready for this. Power off. Power on. So this guy is 120, 139. 140. Power that off. $141. Stop this guy. Restart this guy. Okay, let's see. Back here, let's try it again. Now it pings. So now you have VLAN 11, VLAN 100 pinging. That seems to work. And up here at Ubuntu 4, we should be able to say ping 192.168.1.141, and it's going to cross, both pings are going across separate VLANs at the same time. Good, that's what we want. So everything's reconnected except for the router. Now, when we go to connect the router, what are we going to do? Well, let's look this thing over. I'll just connect it on 0.1. So back to this. I need to configure a third trunk port for the router. So I'm going to paste this in. It's now going to be, I'll make it 0.1, getting up there. And the rest of it should be good. Copy this. Back to this. I'm going to make it come all the way into configuration mode. So, took those off. Wow, none of it worked. I shouldn't have exited the configuration. So let's try this again. I shouldn't have exited global config mode. There you go. So now Ethernet 0.1 comes up and down and up. It's now configured to be a trunk. So what does that mean for the router? Well, the router is going to need one connection that leaves it with both VLANs. So, but the router is configured a little bit differently. So, we'll say enable conf t to get in. Interface, we'll just connect the two, and I forget. A lot of times I forget things are labeled differently. So let's say show IP int brief. and it's fast Ethernet instead of just Ethernet, which will change the way you have to write this. So you gotta pay attention to stuff like that. So let's say FA00, and now just to make sure, we're gonna say on that specific interface, no IP address. We're gonna make sure that there's nothing on there, and get rid of whatever. So I configured an address on there to begin with that had to be pointed to be for routing, right? And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to say interface FA01, no IP address. So I'm essentially getting rid of what I already had. Now I'm going to have to create what's called sub interfaces. So it's going to be interface FA00 dot, and then you give it a number that represents, you can really pick any number, but the easiest way to configure your sub interfaces is to have the sub interface number match the VLAN. That's the way that that I was taught. It should be description with whatever you want to describe it with, encapsulation .1q, should work. When you for the encapsulation command, we're going to say that VLAN 1 is native. So it's going to run on .1q encapsulation. VLAN 1 is native. And then we're going to give IP address. We said this one for VLAN 1 was 192.168.1.1. 255, 255, 255, 128. And we'll copy this and go through a similar process. So now we're going to say, copy this. So now it's going to be subinterface 200. Description HR, encapsulation .1q native, IP address, we said this would be 129, with the same subnet mask. So this should take care of my router. Again, some of this in the beginning is getting rid of our previous config, some of it's reconfiguring our sub interfaces. Now that if we get the sub interfaces configured, it'll work the same way. So we'll copy this, come over here, let's paste it, see what happens. Configuration of multiple sub interfaces of the same main interface with the same VID is not permitted. So what does that mean? Configuring IP routing. Okay. I think unless I'm changing this, incomplete command .1q. Face with the same. Oh, did I not change? What got done here? I went into the adapters, stripped out the addressing. I went to here. Configuration of multiple subinterfaces of the same main interface with the same VLAN ID is not permitted. The VID is already configured on FA0100. Okay. Configuring IP routing on a VLAN subinterface is only allowed if that subinterface is already configured as part of 802.1q, which is what we want. Oh, okay. So enable. Oh, silly me. So this needs to change. We're going to put in a couple lines here. Is not going to be native. It is going to be, this is going to be 100. It's going to be 200. Okay. They're not native VLANs. So, and every once in a while, you get lost and screw this up. Okay, so this line, encapsulation, is telling the adapter that you're encapsulating the data with 802.1q encapsulation, and then you have to tell it the default VLAN, the VLAN that it's reading. All the other VLANs, other than VLAN 100 in this case, are going to be ignored. So, right now, because I'm on interface 2, so if I go back to, or VLAN subinterface, interface 200, I want those two numbers to match. So I go back to subinterface 100. .1q 100. So now do shall run. So we have these two subinterfaces that are both connected using .1q encapsulation, indicating their VLANs here. Oh, we'll have to go back to 0200 in a second. Okay, so it's going to be conf t interface e. Oh, this will be FA00.200. IP address, and let's see if we can get this thing to work now. Copy, paste. There, so that now works. So I made my changes here just in case in my text file. But this is the VLAN you want it to read. This subinterface number can be whatever you want it to be, but for the sake of your sanity, make them match. Ugh. Okay, so this is all done. So now all I should have to do is take and make a connection from 01 to 00 And then now both VLANs of routing are going across here. Let's go to console again. Right? So show IP route. Again, they're all direct connected. They're just sub interfaces now. So if we go back here, and that's been left pinging .11. Now I should be able to ping .139 across the router. Notice again that the times are much higher because of the encapsulation, decapsulation process at the router. So that pretty much concludes step 2, getting this built. Now you're going to have to do it with 4 VLANs, and so you're going to have more sub interfaces and more trunks, but you should have what you need. Your center routers will need at least 2 trunks, one to connect to each of the neighboring switches. Excuse me, the center switches will have to have at least 2. One of them is going to have a third to connect off to the router. The router doesn't necessarily have to connect to the center switch. It could connect off one side, then all the data is propagating. It's probably best to put it in the center, but it doesn't have to be. Oftentimes it's not. What else? Save your configuration, and we'll go from here. Let's see what we can figure out next.